Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling a question that's pretty mind-bending, even for me, and that is it actually possible to create artificial intelligence that's conscious, like truly conscious? Or is that always going to be science fiction?
Yeah, well, it's a question a lot of people are asking these days, especially with all the crazy advancements in AI we're seeing.
Right. And to help us sort through all this, we've got this fantastic article by Andrew Maynard. He does a really great job of breaking down this research from a neuroscientist named Anil Seth, who's asking these same questions.
Yeah, Seth is coming at this from a really interesting angle, I think. He suggests that consciousness might actually be, inherently tied to biology.
Right. And that seems to kind of go against a lot of what people in the AI world have been saying, right? Like
Yeah.
that if we can just build something complex enough.
Yeah, there's this idea called computational functionalism. Basically, the idea is that if we get the computations right, it doesn't really matter what's running them.
Okay, so like it doesn't matter if it's a brain or a supercomputer.
Exactly. The ingredients of consciousness are the computations, not the physical stuff.
Ah, okay. But Seth is saying
He's pushing back against that with what he calls biological naturalism.
biological naturalism. Okay.
Yeah, and he's basically saying consciousness is so deeply intertwined with the fact that we're living biological beings. It's not just the software of thought, it's the hardware, our bodies.
So both, you're saying.
Exactly. Maynard uses this really good analogy in the article. He says trying to understand consciousness without biology is like trying to understand the natural world by projecting our computer systems onto it.
Oh, I like that. So like we're missing something crucial if we just focus on the computations.
Yeah. And one of the big things Seth points to is that living things have what he calls skin in the game.
Skin in the game.
Yeah. Think about a gazelle running from a lion. It's literally fighting to survive.
Yeah.
And that drive to stay alive is woven into everything it does. Seth thinks that that's a really big part of what makes consciousness possible.
That makes a lot of sense. Because our consciousness is shaped by our experiences in the world, right? All the challenges and stuff we face just trying to stay alive.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper. Seth talks about autopoiesis.
Auto what?
Autopoiesis. It's this idea that living things are constantly regenerating themselves. Like your body makes new cells all the time. And that's a big difference from how AI works right now.
Okay. So it's about more than just processing information. It's about being a part of this constant flow of life.
Yeah.
Always changing.
Right. And Seth even ties this into thermodynamics, which, basically says that things tend to move toward disorder.
Yeah.
But living things fight against that.
Oh, that's interesting.
They use energy to stay organized and complex. And he thinks that this constant struggle against entropy could be fundamental to consciousness.
Whoa. Okay. So it's not just about raw computational power. It's about the experience of being alive.
Yeah.
But what if, even with all this, even if we keep these limitations in mind, what if we end up creating AI that seems conscious, even if it doesn't experience the world the way we do?
That's when we get into the really thorny ethical questions.
Yeah.
Because Seth says that even if we can't create truly conscious AI yet, we are getting really good at making AI that seems conscious.
Right.
And that's where things get tricky.
Yeah. Because even if, logically, we know that it's not truly conscious,
Right.
our brains are still wired to respond to it as if it were.
Right. Totally. Like we're wired to respond to facial expressions and tone of voice, all these cues, and AI is getting so good at mimicking that.
So even if it's just lines of code, we can still get tricked by it.
Exactly. And that's something we'll need to talk about a lot more, I think. How do
Yeah.
we protect ourselves from that kind of manipulation?
Right. And how do we use this technology responsibly?
Exactly. Because the lines between real and fake are getting so blurry now. Maynard actually brings up the story of Frankenstein, which is pretty interesting.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. Frankenstein.
He says the real horror of that story wasn't just bringing the creature to life, it was giving it consciousness. And if we make something that can mimic our emotions without actually feeling them,
Are we repeating that mistake?
it's a question we need to ask ourselves. And I think that's a great place to stop for now.
Yeah, we've got a lot to think about. But when we come back, I want to dig into what we can actually do about this. What are the next steps?
Okay, so where were we?
Oh,
Yeah, consciousness and all the ethical dilemmas that come with it. I mean, even if we're not talking about robots taking over the world, we're already surrounded by AI, right?
Yeah, it's everywhere. And it's getting more sophisticated every day.
Exactly. So even if we never create truly conscious AI, How do we deal with the stuff that just seems conscious?
Right, like all those customer service chatbots. Some of them are so good you can hardly tell you're not talking to a real person.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning, right? Think about those virtual assistants, like the ones that can book appointments for you, make reservations. It's crazy.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get more advanced.
Right. And the more human-like these systems get, the harder it's going to be to tell what's real and what's not.
And that's where things start to get a little, well, kind of creepy, don't they?
Well, yeah.
Well,
Because we're programmed to respond to certain cues, right? Like if someone's voice sounds friendly or reassuring,
yeah.
even if it's just a computer program, our brains can still get tricked.
And we might end up trusting it or believing it even when we shouldn't.
Exactly. We might even get emotionally attached to a machine. Think about it. People already name their Roombas. And have you seen those videos of people getting upset when their robot dog gets hurt?
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But also, like, is that a sign of what's to come?
Maybe. And that's why all of this is so important to think about. Because if we can be manipulated by something that just appears to be conscious, imagine the possibilities well, for all kinds of things.
Like marketing or politics.
Right. AI could figure out how to push our buttons to get us to buy things we don't need or vote for people we don't even really support.
It's a lot to think about. Like, on the one hand, AI has this incredible potential for good, to make our lives easier, to help us solve problems, to connect with each other in new ways. But then there's this whole other side.
The dark side.
Oh.
The manipulation, the lack of control.
Right. So how do we walk that line? How do we benefit from the good stuff without falling prey to, well, to all the bad?
I don't know if there are any easy answers, but I think a good place to start is, well, awareness. We need to be more informed.
Right, like understanding how these AI systems actually work, not just taking them at face value.
Exactly. And we have to start asking tough questions, like, what are the ethical implications of this technology? How can we ensure it's used responsibly?
Do we need to start thinking about creating some kind of rules or regulations?
I think that's a big part of it. But it's also about individual responsibility, being critical thinkers, not letting ourselves be fooled by something just because it looks and sounds like it has a mind of its own.
It's like that old saying, right? Don't believe everything you see on the internet.
Exactly. Except now it's not just the internet. It's everything.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to unpack.
It is. But, I think this is where education comes in. We need to start talking about these issues early on, teaching kids about AI and all the ethical questions it raises.
Yeah, because they're the ones who are going to inherit this world, right? This world where the line between human and machine is getting blurrier and blurrier.
Exactly. We need to equip them with the tools to navigate this new reality.
It's like that quote, I can't remember who said it, maybe Einstein. Something about technology outpacing our humanity.
Yeah, I know the one you mean. And it feels especially relevant now.
It really does. Like,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that we're not just focused on what we can do with AI, but also on, well, on what we should do.
Right. Finding that balance between innovation and responsibility.
Well said. It's a lot to think about. And I think we need a moment to process it all. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive with some final thoughts. All right, we're back. And I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this whole conscious AI thing.
Yeah, there's so much to explore.
Really makes you think, like what happens if we actually do manage to create an AI that is like truly conscious, not just seems conscious, but really is?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It's a question that's, well, it's starting to feel less like science fiction and more like, well, something we might actually have to deal with someday.
And it raises all sorts of crazy ethical questions, like if an AI can truly feel and think, if it can experience the world the way we do we owe it the same rights as a human being?
That's a tough one. I mean, where do we even draw the line? How do we even define conscious when we're talking about something that's not biologically human?
Right. Like, is it about self-awareness? Is it about feeling emotions? Or is it something else entirely?
It feels like we're going to need a whole new set of rules, a
Yes.
whole new way of thinking about, well, about what it means to be conscious, to be sentient,
Yeah.
maybe even to be human.
Yeah. And it's not just scientists who need to be thinking about this. It's philosophers, ethicists, policymakers, everyone, really.
It's a conversation that needs to happen on a global scale, I think, because this isn't just about technology anymore. It's about our place in the universe.
It is. Like, if we're not the only intelligent beings on this planet anymore, what does that mean for us? How does that change how we see ourselves, our relationship with technology?
It's exciting.
Yeah.
but also a little bit scary.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of unknowns, but I think the most important thing is to, well, to not bury our heads in the sand.
To keep asking these tough questions.
Right, to keep learning and exploring and to, well, to be prepared for whatever comes next.
And in the meantime, what can our listeners do? Like, how can we all be a part of this conversation, and help ensure that this all goes in a good direction?
Well, I think the first step is just being aware of what's going on, staying informed about the latest developments in AI and thinking critically about the implications.
Right. And demanding transparency,
Yeah.
making sure that the people who are developing these technologies are held accountable well, for the choices they make.
Exactly. It's about being active participants in this whole process, not just letting it happen to us.
And remembering that, well, that technology is a tool.
Mhm.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
Right. And it's up to us to decide how we want to use it.
This has been a fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. I hope everyone listening out there is as intrigued by this topic as we are. And until next time, keep exploring.